President Biden laid out an ambitious mission yesterday, and this one is personal. More than 7 years after his son Beau died from brain cancer, he stood in the library dedicated to President John F. Kennedy and delivered a challenge to the nation 60 years to the day after Kennedy issued his literal moonshot challenge.
Beating cancer is something we can do together. The goal is to cut cancer death rates by at least 50% in the next 25 years. To turn more cancers from death sentences into chronic diseases people can live with.
But is it achievable? What will it take, and what are the biggest obstacles in the path? I'm joined by Dr. William Dahut. He's Chief Scientific Officer at the American Cancer Society. Dr. Michael Hassett is a physician, Chief Quality Officer at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and Associate Professor at Harvard Medical School. Doctors, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Dahut, let me start with you. The rhetoric was undoubtedly powerful, but is this really a potential game changer in your world?
Well, I think one thing to consider is, 40 to 45% of cancers, both in this country and worldwide, are preventable. They're either from tobacco use, obesity, alcohol use, infectious diseases. So to put everybody together, whether it's biotech, nonprofits like ourselves, obviously the cancer centers, and ultimately the patient, I think we can get to this goal. It's not going to be easy. Getting to the moon wasn't easy. But I think putting things together, I think it's at least something worth striving for.
Dr. Hassett, do you share the optimism?
Absolutely, I do. Looking over the past 30 years, we've already seen a 32% reduction in cancer deaths. That's looking back to 1990. And as Dr. Dahut said, I think through better prevention, screening, diagnosis, and treatment, while it's an aggressive goal, it's an achievable goal.
So, Dr. Hassett, staying with you, explain to people what you believe. You touched upon it a second ago. What are the major areas that you can imagine this initiative having the most dramatic effect on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are 4 areas. The first is in prevention. Many, as we just heard, many cancers are preventable. And everything that we can do to prevent a cancer is a cancer we don't have to treat. The second has to do with screening and early detection. We have tools such as mammography and colonoscopy that we know work, but there are great new technologies that can help us screen and detect cancers even earlier, and they're, I think, going to be a big part of this initiative. The third is treatment. Cancer treatment has really revolutionized over the past 20 or 30 years, and that will continue. And the fourth, I think, is really managing the burden of cancer, the symptoms and the suffering that's caused by cancer and treatment. And if we can target those 4 goals, I definitely think this is an achievable.
Dr. Dahut, would you add anything to that list?
Well, I think those are actually tremendous points. The other thing, obviously, is making sure we have cancer access available to all in equal way. It's interesting, if you looked at cancer deaths based on SES in 1950, the folks in the highest SES actually had a much higher cancer death rate, probably due to less exercise because poor diet in that time. But over time, that's changed. And we now know that folks from rural areas, poor SES, and different racial populations have a much poorer outcome, stage for cancer.
Well, it's not just you mentioning that, Dr. Dahut, as I'm sure you both know. This whole issue of health disparities, which a lot of us finally focused on during COVID, was mentioned yesterday by the president. Here he is.
It's a disease we often diagnose too late and have too few ways to prevent it in the first place. Where there are stark inequities based on race, disability, zip code, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other factors.
Dr. Hassett, you went down your list a couple of minutes ago, but as a layperson, it seems to me that if nothing were to change except equal access to treatment, clinical trials, Medicaid funding, that sort of thing, that in and of itself could dramatically cut these numbers. Is that not accurate, or is that naive?
No, I agree with you completely. I think disparities are a huge piece of this problem, and one that the president mentioned in his remarks, as you point out. We have to address the disparities issue, and without doing so, I don't think we can achieve this goal. But I do know that we and other organizations, including the American Cancer Society, are dedicated not just to try to improving the technology of treatment, but improving the delivery of treatment so that we're providing effective treatments to everybody who deserves it.
You know, another thing the president spoke to, Dr. Dahut, was he mentioned mRNA technology and raised the prospect of some sort of cancer vaccine. I want to play yet again what he had to say on that subject.
To prevent cancers, scientists are exploring whether mRNA vaccine technology that brought us safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines could be used to stop cancer cells when they first arise.
You know, Dr. Dahut, I have to say, while that thrilled me when I heard it, it also made me incredibly nervous. A couple of weeks ago, Dr. Fauci was on our radio show, and we spent a decent amount of time talking about this sick anti-science agenda that has captured so much of the population. Do you worry that when mRNA is part of the mix, and that triggered so many people inappropriately, I would argue, but nevertheless it happened, do you worry that this effort has potential to fall prey, at least in part, to the same anti-science crap that we've had to live with over the last couple of years of COVID?
Well, I certainly hope not. You know, and I think if we think more broadly about mRNA technology and think actually the power of the immune system, then perhaps that becomes more palpable for folks. You know, one great thing about an immune treatment is that it's actually a living treatment. It's a treatment actually that can basically change as the cancer changes. Many of our targeted therapies against, you know, one agent or one drug or one pathway, you know, the cancer is smart enough to get around, but the immune system can adapt. So mRNA is a technology. You know, it's not really a broad area of science, but really it's a means to deliver immunotherapy. So hopefully folks will understand that.
Yeah, unfortunately, what you're saying is dependent upon reason, which is not part of the debate in so much of the medical world this day. Do you worry about this, Dr. Hassett, based on the last couple of years?
I do worry about it, and I would echo the points just made. I think as I see the immune system, we know that it's already trying to fight cancer, and anything we can do to get the immune system to be more active in that fight is a good thing. And there are many different technologies that can get us there. I agree there's been a lot of buzz and misinformation around mRNA technology as one approach. But I do firmly believe that through education and hard work, we can get past that and get these treatments that we know are going to be effective out to as many people as possible.
You know, Dr. Dahut, it seems to me that in addition to what the president said yesterday, and by the way, he officially launched this a long time ago when he was vice president in 2016, then relaunched as president in February, and I guess because of the 60th anniversary of JFK's speech about the, as I said, literal moonshot, he came here to do this yesterday. But it seems to me that provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, as it's called, also matter in the work that you gentlemen and your organizations do when you allow Medicare for the first time, it's incredible it took this long, to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. When you cap out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs for people on Medicare, Dr. Dahut, it seems to me that can have a direct impact on access to the kind of treatment that we have even without these advances, no?
No, I mean, I think policy matters, laws matter. You know, it's interesting. I'm actually speaking to you a block from the White House today. Today is the American Cancer Society's Cancer Advocacy Network Lobby Day, and today we have over 600 advocates from every state in the country, in the district, and Puerto Rico, talking to the people on the Hill about what can be done, and talking about, for example, what happened in the IRA to really impact patients. I'm a prostate cancer physician. A lot of our effective drugs, their retail costs are $12,000 or $13,000 a month. Patients are on these for years, and capping this at $2,000 total for a year allows people to take the right dose of the drug and allows people to have a better quality of life because the cancer is less likely to come back.
Dr. Dahut, one more second with you. Did the people who visited their elected representatives encounter the same kind of irrational, partisan stuff that we've seen so much of, or is cancer relatively immune from that?
Well, you know, cancer affects everybody. You know, we're a nonpartisan organization. You know, we're happy to get support from both sides. You know, I'm from Maryland. I met with the Maryland folks, and they were very supportive. But my sense is cancer affects every single person, and only by working together through things like the moonshot can we have an impact. So,
Dr. Hassett, this one really is for you, is Boston-based, and let's be, I guess, short-sighted for a second. It seems to me that Boston has great potential to benefit, not only because of the incredible work that's already done here on cancer by organizations like yours at Dana-Farber, but when the president announced, I want to read it, the Advanced Research Products Agency for Health, I guess it's called ARPA-H because it sure as hell doesn't roll off your tongue. The woman who's going to run it, the doctor who's going to run it, is a vice president of a technology company right here in Boston, not to mention the fact that the guy who's going to make the decision about where that's placed, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, served in Congress with Richie Neal from Massachusetts, who's the chair of the, as you're always supposed to call it, the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. We have great potential to benefit even more than most, no?
Absolutely. Boston is just a center of biomedical research and technological innovation. And I think that this is a good thing for our industry and our citizens.
You know, Dr. Dahut, before you go, I was reading some numbers from your organization, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the expectation, the projection for 2022 is somewhere in the neighborhood of just over 600,000 people will die from cancer in the United States in this calendar year. And again, to harken back to what I said a minute ago, this was launched in 2016 by the vice president, relaunched in February. There have been a lot of resource problems and staffing problems. Is it realistic, for example, in your mind, if this becomes as real as the president wants it to be, that that number in the future, instead of 600,000, could be 300,000? You believe that, apparently, yes?
I think it's time. We know the problems. We know people need to have prevention. We know to have screening and early detection. We know what it is. And we need to study how to do this. You know, we can't just simply, put up billboards and expect people to go in and get a colonoscopy. So we basically, we know the problems, and yes, I think it can be done. And I'm glad we have the leadership in order to get there.
Dr. Hassett, we almost never end on an optimistic note on this television program. Do you want to end on one? Do you agree with Dr. Dahut?
I do agree with him. I, as a researcher, got funding from the Initial Cancer Moonshot program from 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we've been making progress through that. And I think that success that we've had already really gives me hope that a reinvigorated effort is going to have even more impact going forward.
Well, I think everybody watching hopes both of your optimism is translated into outcomes. Let's hope it is. Dr. Hassett, Dr. Dahut, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.